Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. I am, of course, your host, Chris White, and this is the LinkedIn Live program for technical sales professionals, technical sales leaders, and let me emphasize live. These conversations are unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. And this week, I'm joined by someone who knows a thing or two about pre-sales. He's been doing it for 30 plus years. Now, I was going to say something witty like, that's longer than I've been alive. But Dave, you know that not to be true. Dave McCulley is the one of the co-founders of Provarity. He is currently the head of pre-sales at Provarity, and they are a company designed to help pre-sales leaders and sales leaders achieve more and shine some light on what he likes to call a dark side of the moon. That's precisely what we're going to talk about. Dave, my friend, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Chris. How are you today?
I'm well, man. Thanks for joining. I know you're up in the Boston area. You guys having the same heat that we're having down here in DC?
We are struggling. We're on a six-day heat wave, which is long for us in New England, and hopefully it breaks today, which is the goal.
Yeah. It would kind of be nice to find the dark side of the moon right about now, wouldn't it?
It would.
So Dave, I know you're with Provarity. Do you mind taking a minute and sort of more formally introducing yourself, sir?
Sure. My name's Dave McCulley. Again, like you stated, I run sales engineering at Provarity here. I've been an IC for probably most of my career, 2/3 of it at least. Mostly federal DoD, which is, I believe, something you and I have similarities in. We both come out of the DoD.
We have very much in common. Yes, indeed.
Right. So I think, pre-sales in general has its challenges that we're all well aware of, and the DoD side of the house or the federal side of the house, due to some of the buying challenges and complexities, it can be even more complex in some ways. So I'm sure we would have tons of interesting stories on how we work the DoD side of the house.
I miss those days, actually. I never served in the military, and I, quote, sold to the DoD for about 5 years, and I did some consulting with the federal government. Mm-hmm. I really valued and appreciated. First of all, I valued and appreciated obviously the service they made, the commitment they made, the service they gave. But I also really enjoyed working with them. That was as close to serving our country as I came, which was serving the people that right. served our country. So how long did you work in the federal government, and then when did you start to sort of shift into what you're doing now?
Sure. So the federal government was way back in my semantic days. I mean, that's when we were selling cyber security solutions to the DoD. And to your point earlier, that is the point where you feel like you're helping, right? Trying to make sure you have the right security and controls in place to make sure that side of the house is taken care of, right? So I, with Symantec, years, a lot of good friends still in Symantec, a lot of mentors, a lot of folks that, have taught, trained, learned from throughout the years. And then started doing some smaller startups where, again, still heavily focused on DoD segment stuff. Once you get into the DoD, sometimes it's tough to get away from it. There are some uniquenesses that come with the territory. So and then I started getting into the smaller arena, dealing with small companies. Really, kind of one of the things that I got really in-depthly involved in is how to do valuations, right? Those POC activities that in the DoD can be quite lengthy and complex. And back when we were doing them, at least I was doing them, there's no guides, no rhyme or reason. It was kind of get in there and figure it out. And once you've mastered your own playbook, you just took it with you from organization to organization. And then I moved into some really early stage companies, taking that model and methodology and leveraging, what I've learned throughout the years and applying it to early companies, trying to figure out, because, the early companies, we're ready to cross the chasm. Well, have you figured out how to, demo it, So they'd say, yeah, we want to evaluate it, and then how to evaluate it and what's involved in that, and, you know, success criteria, product, all that stuff that comes along with POCing to get to a technical win. And some of these organizations, products just weren't there yet, right? So you take the methodology, you bring it to a young company, and it can tell an organization a lot. So I did a lot of work with early companies, you know, bringing that methodology to find out if we can get a deal to technical closure to opportunity close, right? So that was really the work I've been doing more recently until Provarity, which a couple of good friends of mine asked me to take a look at this, and I had some really good ideas and a vision on tools that I thought pre-sales needed to help sales, because ultimately it's about sales, and that's when I got engaged with this team, and it's been a good ride.
And how long have you been with, or how long has it been since you guys started Provarity?
So Provarity's been around, I'm going to say almost 3, and I've been here a little over 18 months.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. But by the way, Dave, you may have noticed we have at least one comment for someone online. Folks, I want to invite you to say hello if you're out there joining us live. We don't have eyes on you, so would love to hear from you. And by the way, if you have any questions for myself or Dave, please feel free to ask. So Dave, you use the term technical win, and that's what we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Achieving the technical win with consistency, and in particular, when product evaluations are involved, whether, to your point, whether that's a proof of value, proof of concept, everybody has their term. Yeah. Let's start with this term, though, the technical win. Some people in our profession are opposed to using that term. I actually like the term. I like the term, whether it's technical win, technical close, technical victory, technical decision, use your term. But I actually like the term. Clearly, that's a term that that resonates with you. Do you just have a stance on the importance of the use or the recognition of the technical win?
Yeah, this is a great topic. Lots of difference of opinion, lots of debate here. I kind of come from the perspective of, you know, what does the customer want, right? That's what I'm trying to deal with. As we know, a common trend that ties into this is you'll find sales leaders that say, I'm not doing POCs or POVs anymore. I don't want to do it. Well, the reality is when your competitor walks in and says, I'll do a POC, you're going to step up and do one, right? So if you're not prepared to do one, A, you're going to be behind because you're not prepared. And B, you just told the customer you're not going to do one, and now you're going to do one. So you kind of lost this relationship trust value that comes along with winning business, right? So the point I like to make is you got to be prepared for whatever the customer wants. I like to use the term technical validation, right? Because I don't want to get into the debate. Is a POC different than a POV? Proof of concept, proof of value. Is there a difference? Is it the same thing? I mean, I've seen customers saying, oh, we don't like POCs, so we're going to go do POVs. So they changed the label, but then within a couple of months, they're back doing the same thing they were doing a POC. So you know, it doesn't make any sense. And then you've heard everything else under the sun, like, oh, we're going to do, you know, pilots, paid pilots, custom demos. At the end of the day, customer has a problem, business case, and they want to make sure your solution can solve it. So to me, it's technical validation, regardless of the path you want to take them down, right? So to me, it's what do you need to get the technical validation? And I personally, you know, I think it'd be interesting to have those debates. Wouldn't it be great to have like a dozen people who want POC, POV, technical win, not technical win, staff? Definitely a spirited conversation amongst folks in our industry.
Yeah. Well, and I love your term, the technical validation. In fact, I don't know if you recall, I don't know if you've seen me. I know I've talked about this in a few of the conversations that I've had or a few of the webinars I've done, but I actually think that our primary responsibility is to provide validation at every step of the customer's journey. And Dave, I even sort of tested my own theory by looking up the word validate. And the definition, literally, people can look it up, is to demonstrate and or support the truth or value of. Like that's our role, right? That's what we do. Now you like, what's that?
No, we are the trusted advisors of the sales team, right? So that aligns to the role.
and deep. And we need to make sure that we're emphasizing value in addition to truth. Right. And I think that's one of the mistakes that we, as quote, the sales engineer, right, the technical pre-sales professional, we get too focused on the technology sometimes and not enough on outcomes and business value. And so I think that's why people struggle a little bit. So let's take this a half a step further. I give you credit for giving me one of my favorite terms in our space, which is this notion that once a deal moves into evaluation stage, we're now sort of on the dark side of the moon. Elaborate on your sort of thinking around that idea.
So if you get a presentation from me on our product, you will see a slide on the dark side of the moon. It was a saying, I think it originated back in the semantic days with my Fed team. There would be, we'd be at the end of the quarter doing a quarter close, trying to get a deal across the wire. Inevitably, one would be, the sales manager would pull the SE, the rep, the team together and say, okay, where's this deal? And we'd know everything about the deal from a sales perspective. But the reality is we didn't know what the state of the deal is from a technical validation perspective. There's a lot that goes on in these evaluation processes. And you never knew, was it healthy? And by health, does the customer think we're in good standing? Are we, achieving our milestones from a timing perspective? Are we knocking out the success criteria like we're supposed to? Are they overall happy and engaged? Gosh, I've lost or had so many delays on POCs for a number of reasons. I've had cyber attacks. I've had weather events. We've had major historical events that have occurred that have just taken down, knocked out POCs. And those are things that are a lot of times outside of our control. But when you get to these end of quarter conversations, and then all of a sudden they find out, oh, this deal's we're not going to technically close this on the date we thought. And now this is basically scope creep. So now that is going to impact that deal coming in, which could impact my team's number, which could impact the company's number, and trickle all the way up to sales enablement and rev ops, all the way up to a CFO's, forward leading guidance on where he thinks the company's going. And that's because everything that goes on in an evaluation is unknown. It's the dark side of the moon.
Yeah.
I think sales and marketing have got all the cool tools, right? As SEs, up to a couple of years ago, we're running POCs on spreadsheets,
of course,
Post-it notes, PowerPoint. It's probably one of the hardest actual tasks in the sales cycle, and it's still being done heavy paper. And a lot of the customers I talk to still do it that way. It's a lot of paper manual process, and no one in the organization is doing it the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you even mentioned the notion of success criteria. Like, are we satisfying the success? Do we even have success criteria, right? Like, have we even defined objectives and success criteria and use cases, et cetera, right? Sometimes we're so eager to let's just get into POC or POV and with no disrespect to the sales professional, because I understand, because I've been there, but when it moves into an evaluation, as an account executive, I might sort of switch my brain off a little bit, right? Like, hey, my expert sales engineers got this, and he or she, they know what they're doing and they're going to run with it. So, I'm just going to sort of put this, sort of in the bank for the end of quarter, and, life is good. But by the way, Dave, I like to just sort of recognize the people that chime in. Alvin, it's good to see you, my friend. He joins these regularly, and he's giving us a vote of confidence for the use of the technical win.
Excellent.
And you're right. At the end of the day, it's all about closed won deals. So Dave, let's pick this apart a little bit further. First, what I know in some of the conversations you and I've had, you've mentioned that some sales leaders seem to be reluctant to make evaluations a key part of the sales process. What is, from your experience, is the driver behind that, do you think?
So I believe the driver behind it is the investment that goes into it, the man hours, the time. And when you go down one of these POCs or POVs and you don't win it, there's definitely a toll that's taken on the team, emotionally, mentally, everything, right? And then a lot of these, you'll get younger reps or less experienced reps. So the goal is to look active. And in an attempt to do that, they'll start throwing a lot of POCs at their SEs that we like to use the words are not well qualified.
Right.
So when you take you don't need to do many of those as an SE before you realize we got to find a way to fix this.
Yep.
Right. So what do you need to do to understand that we actually have enough questions and answers to validate they have a problem and I have a solution that can solve it. And we know that technical validation steps need to occur to make that happen. Right. You mentioned earlier success criteria, right? Success criteria, I've heard use cases, they tie together business case. When it comes to an SE, it's success criteria in my world, right? That's the technical validation. I have to knock that out. I learned early, actually by accident, when a customer was so overwhelmed and said to me, Dave, I need a test plan. I don't have one. Can you build one for me? I'm like, great. So I go off and, I build like a 12-question test plan. I hand it to the customer. I go, this is perfect. We're going to use this. And then quickly I realized, wow, if I give the customer the success criteria, 9 out of 10 times they take all of it and I should win it because I wrote it, right? So, it should be a home run. And then I've learned I could always negotiate 1 or 2 additionals. So if I can control that, then I can control the technical win.
Yeah.
Right? Because now I can control scope, time creep, and then I like to have a technical meeting, a close date. Like when I start my POCs, this is the date we're going to have the meeting and we're going to declare technical win or loss. And I almost like to, politely set that expectation so they know when the date comes, we're going to go through them and knock them off. Good, not good, good, not good. And 90% of winning technical validation is just having good relationships with your technical counterparts. Sales rep told me early, people buy from people they like, right? And as SEs, one of the biggest things I like to coach the ones I'm working with is be likable, right? If you can be likable, when you get to the end of that journey and we're going through that checklist on success criteria, I've had some SEs barely even look at or some technical evaluators barely look at the charts. They just loved working with us, and they'd be just, blindly check. Yep, you did that, you did that, you did that. We look good. And then off you go, right?
Yeah.
So there are definitely skills, but there's a bit of an art to it as well, right?
Absolutely, no doubt. Well, and you've said so many things that are worth just double clicking on for a moment. You mentioned the importance of relationship and building that relationship, building that rapport, but also the discipline and the structure, right? So we need both, and the more we can actually bring them the structure, right? Here are the things that most people are concerned about, trying to achieve, trying to validate, etc. By the way, you also use the word validate in terms of their project or their objectives, right? To me, it's a two-way street, right? We should be supporting, improving the truth and value of our solution, but we should also be validating is what they're attempting to do. Does that even make sense, right? Yeah. By the way, just a few people to recognize. Leslie Penny, my friend, it's good to see you. A poorly designed POC is worse than not doing one. Well said. And Oscar chimes in as well. Yes, lots of time and qualification is key. So Dave, let's pick this part a little bit further. You started talking about some of the lessons that you've learned and some of the things that you discovered helped shine a little bit of light on the dark side of the moon. Let's pick this apart a little bit further. What else, or what are some of the other things that you've discovered to produce consistent success?
Okay. So one of the things that you realize impacts your number. Now, when you talk success, I'm talking sales team number, right? Because we're all in it for the same thing, right? We want to hit our numbers, right? Yeah. We all have that variable element. That's the goal. When you have things like delay in a POC, delay can be delay. And in the dark side of the moon example, no one knows what that delay is. So these delays you have in the POC just keeps pushing the date out. The problem is the sales reps don't get the intelligence. So I like to call it evaluation intelligence dark side of the moon, isolated, no connection into the CRM intelligence, right? Which is the opportunity itself. So when, as I stated earlier, when these delays can impact, I like to use the term encroach on opportunity close date. We like to call it encroachment. That means at the end of the quarter, the sales rep is now missing a deal that if I could have told them a month ago, because the data is there, it's just on a spreadsheet or a post-it note, that this thing is good. He could have moved that date out, getting it off that commit list. And at the end of the quarter, he's not trying to explain why he missed this number and why that opportunity was on the commit list when it shouldn't be. So the data from the dark side of the moon, or the evaluation, isn't just about getting the technical close, although that is very, very important. It's all about how it can trickle into your deals, again, the company's deals, and hitting goals all the way up the revenue chain. So there are important elements within the dark side of the moon that we need to really look at, and how to get it into sales hands so they understand. The other thing I like to look at, and this is the sales engineering leader side in me, is this concept of SE to AE ratio. Right? It actually drives me a little bit crazy, because I've seen a lot of, chatting and blogging on it, and what should the true ratio be. A lot of times industries will say, I'm in cyber, it should be 2 to 1. Well, the reality is you need to understand how many POCs or POVs an SE can do before you get to what I like to call the point of diminishing returns. Meaning, let's say I can do 5, but I take on 6. Now all 6 suffer. Now all 6 are at risk of scope creep, becoming unhealthy, missing number. If I can figure that number out, then I can really understand how to build a proper sales structure. Example, sales reps. Let's say I'm at 2 to 1, and I need a sales rep to do 4 POCs each to make their quarter that number on average. Now the number's 8, but I can only do 5, right? So the math tells me it should be a 1 to 1. Otherwise, I'm going to have 2 teams struggling, not just 1, right? So it's really understanding the data that goes into running and managing these POCs, and how many can you do, right? Yeah. And then we tack on our other challenges of the day, which is, our economic situation and the SE shortage. Now, all of a sudden, you're in a situation where you have a sales engineering team, you're down 2 people, AE still need coverage, right? You're still running POCs in a manual model. How do you optimize this? How do you scale? How do you do that with that, without having that kind of intelligence and process to really manage what's going on the dark side of the moon?
Yeah. So I'm going to repeat what you said. I think it's a pretty insightful comment. And that is when talking about the AE-SE pairing and the AE-SE ratio, looking at it in terms of how many people, how many AEs for an SE, it's the wrong question, right? The right question should be, how many deals, let's just call them deals for a moment. How many deals can any SE reasonably work? And particularly if they get to a technical evaluation, how many evaluations can they reasonably handle without having diminishing returns across all of them? And does that number equal the number of deals that the AEs that they're supporting need to get across the line for the quarter? Right? I mean, there's some pretty simple math there. So let's take this a step further then. Let's just say, for argument's sake, as an SE for a given organization, I can arguably handle, let's just say I can arguably handle 10 in a quarter, right? What can SEs do to improve their own efficiency and effectiveness in working these technical evaluations? In other words, what are some of the potentially mistakes that we SEs are making that hurt our productivity, and what can we do to change that?
Okay. Tricks of the trade, right? And the POC, POV, right? So I'll tell you what some of the things I like to do within the POC, right? Obviously, that whole, what I like to call technical and logistics discovery, right? So rep owns opportunity discovery. In my opinion, that shouldn't even go to the SC until that has been pretty well vetted and agreed upon. Now, most POCs traditionally, at least historically where I come out of in the DoD side, there's 2 elements. There's the planning phase, meaning, okay, we're going to, agree to do a POC. Let's have a planning meeting, start collecting whatever technical data, are there any prerequisites I need? Let's have a go live date, and then the clock starting. And then that's really where I get ready now, when that clock starts. And then an end date, because you want to close this business this quarter, and I need to give my rep 30 days to get through contracting. So let's make sure we get this time frame worked out. So that's some of the stuff that I like to do up front. And then, during that technical and logistics discovery meeting, work out, who are the key players, build a little rapport, make sure we're in sync on and have a good idea of what to expect when I take you on this evaluation journey. Make sure, because expectations, overcommit or no, undercommit, over deliver, make sure expectations are in line, all critical elements to having a solid POC.
Yeah.
Right. Then we obviously have a kickoff. I always do a kickoff call. I like to review the success criteria, make sure we're on sync, nothing's changed. I do weekly calls. It's just a requirement, right? You want to do a POC with me? I do a 30-minute status call, check in, make sure there's no issues, nothing going on. And believe it or not, the reason I do this is if I don't have people attending those calls, I know I have a lost customer, right? The relationship's not there. They're not committed. A lot of times when I'm managing individuals and they tell me, how's your POC going? It's great. The first question I'll ask is, when was the last time you talked to them? Right? Because I can tell a lot. Well, I haven't talked to them in a month. I go, your POC is dead. It's over.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, they're not checking in with you. They can't give you the courtesy to get on a call. So those are the things that I look at and I like to do. And then it's obviously, I have my follow-up rules, right? To me, it's 24 hours, one business day. Right. And I'm a big advocate of being upfront and honest. If I don't know something, I'll tell you I don't know it. Right. I don't like to even try to make up answers. Right. Compliment them. Great question. Haven't heard this before. Let me get back to you. And if you can't get that question answered in 24 hours, then you need to send an email saying, sorry, my team hasn't gotten back to me yet. I'm still on it. Right. Just let them know you're there and engaged and you're a partner throughout this journey. So those are a lot of the things that I like to do. Most of this is soft skill activity. It's just, project management, relationship building, common courtesy, follow-up, to make sure all those elements are in play. And then a lot of times at the end of these POCs, the greatest compliment is, I really enjoyed this journey with you. This was a great experience, right? And it reflects on the company, because a lot of times you're going to get a good recommendation to say, this is the kind of organization I want to do business with. And you as the SE throughout that POC, you're the face of that journey, right? So you need to have a high bar and a high standard there, I think. And that's it's something that's tough to practice, right? And I don't think we train enough on it. One of the compliments I'll give Semantic, I'm going to do a little throwback. Semantic is they never broke SEs away from sales reps during sales kickoff trainings. We stayed with our sales mates. We trained with them.
I love that.
Soft skills with them.
Yep.
6 months later, we had a technical session, which was SEs only. So too many times, I think sales teams will say, okay, now the SEs are going to go off and do their technical session. I think that's a disaster strategy, because your SEs probably know the tech. They know the space. They're pretty good at it. What we always could use practice in and always make stronger is the soft skill side of the house.
Yeah. Yeah. I so love the things you're talking about. By the way, Dave, let's push our own pause button. Folks, I'm talking to Dave McCulley of Provarity. We're talking technical win. We're talking POCs, POVs, technical evaluations, some of the skills that we need to leverage, shining light on what Dave likes to call the quote, the dark side of the moon. By all means, if you have any questions for Dave or myself, please feel free to ask. If you just want to say hello, we do not have eyes on you. So if you're out there and want to say hello, please raise your hand and say hello. So you talked a little bit, Dave, about some of the soft skills, relationship building. I do believe that we are the face of the company. The client, the prospect is experiencing the product and the company through us. And we always need to level up our game where that's concerned. I completely agree. You also mentioned project management. So this isn't just it's sales, it's project management. we also have to be the technical experts, right? We have to find answers answers to questions that we may not know, immediately. So there is a lot going on here. So there's no wonder why so many deals fail in evaluation. One of the questions that I have for you is, I think a lot of sales engineers find themselves feeling like either I don't want to push too hard. I don't want to be a pushy quote sales professional. So I don't, if they seem to be, dragging their feet a little bit, I don't want to push too hard. Number one, and then number two, I think sometimes they feel like, look, it's sort of out of my hands, like I can only control so much. So, and I think those are somewhat related, but let's take those in either order that you care to. Have you ever heard, people say, well, I don't want to be too pushy, and what's your advice there? And how do we handle the situation when we feel like, it's out of our hands at this point?
Yeah, that's kind of that, I'm going to say, art side of the whole thing, right? Because we do need to maintain a high level of technical competence through all this, because that's the trust. I mean, if I walk into a customer and I don't know my tech, then I'm going to lose credibility, and that's gone. Yeah. On the other side of the house, it's just, I think it's a lot of expectation setting, and come up with a process you really like that does have its level of consistency and repeatability. Because then you don't have to worry about it. Now you can focus your time on those relationship elements, right? It's almost like when you're first learning to demo, and you're so nervous about the demo, and you never pick your head up to listen because the customers are giving you great information, and you should pivot the demo because there's a real problem we can solve here. But because you're so new at demoing, your head's down. I gotta get through each step, and you miss it, right? It's the same thing with the soft skills on the POC side. Right? If your head's so down in the tech and making sure you're so concerned, you got to pick your head up, and you got to read your customers. You got to make sure they're getting it. On my checking calls, I always like to say, listen, how many folks are we got, logging into the system? I like to do usability calls. I call them training at first, but any usability questions. You struggling with anything not make sense, anything not intuitive? Love taking that feedback, bringing my product management team in, because usually if the challenge with us as product people, and I tell my guys this all the time, is I get one first experience. Even with my product, I've had one first, it's gone. I'll never get it back. Yeah. Right. And I use it every day. It's like easy to me. Right. But every time you're having a customer evaluate your solution, they get one first experience. Right. So you got to make it good, and you got to make sure you're checking in and making sure that they're getting it and they understand it. And these are just tricks you learn through the years. I mean, because how do you get somebody to say, you know what, I'm struggling with your solution, without making them feel like they're struggling with this? You want to make anybody feel like they're not competent. So you got to find that balance, right? And that's just, reading your customers, getting good cues. It's probably a ton of experience too, that gets you through all of that. Yeah. Because, there's lots of guides on how to, run a good POC, but the guide on interacting with your technical evaluator during this journey, that's a tough one, right? Yeah. I don't know if it really exists well.
Right? Yeah. How often should we be checking in with our account executives? Should we be touching base with them, at every step along the technical evaluation journey?
In my experience, every day. Every day. So we're all in this game for one thing, right? We want to make money. And I tell all the SEs, the up and comers that I mentor and coach, and other folks, I go, you need to have a phenomenal relationship with your selling partner, because that's the only way you guys are going to work through these processes, understand the roles and responsibilities. Know when I get stuck and I need my rep to come in, provide me air cover, right? Well, I'm trying to get myself out of a situation, whether it's in a POC or in a demo. You just have to work on creating that synergy. So I believe every day, when I was interviewing, looking for work, I'd want to spend a couple of interviews with my AEs. I wanted to make sure they were clear on my expectations. I'm a selling partner, right? I'm not a stapler, or I'm not I'm not scissors or a Post-it notepad. I'm not a tool for you to fly me in, use me, and fly me out. I want to know the business too. And I tell all SEs, know your business. You should know what deals are in the pipe, what's closing, what's important, what's the next most important task you got to do to win your business. You should know everything that's going on. And when you're not next to your selling counterpart, you know they got their objectives and there are things that they need to do, and you have the things that you have to do. And a lot of my reps, some of my reps, they would be tight in my POCs, others would not. They would let me run with it. So it depends, and you're going to find all different types of selling partners. So you're going to have to kind of adapt and adjust to those different types of personalities and models to figure out what's the best POC or POV strategy for you in that organization with that selling partner.
Yeah. At the end of the day, like everything that frankly I talk about, the foundation is the partnership with our sales counterparts, right? And I mean, this is the reason we're in the game, right? Is to collaborate with them and help the team cross the goal line. So, by the way, you got a vote of confidence from someone. Unfortunately we don't see the name, but 100% more communication with the AEs. I don't know too many AEs who get frustrated by too much communication. Usually it's the opposite. Sometimes, but usually it's the opposite. So Dave, let's sort of shift the conversation slightly from what individuals can be doing to organizations. Let's say, for argument's sake, that I run a sales organization for, let's say, a medium size, software company, and we do some POCs, with some frequency, but it's a little bit haphazard, and we've got a few folks that are pretty good at running POCs, and we've got a few that maybe aren't as good, and we just sort of leave it up to them to do what they think is the right thing to do. We'd like to start adding some structure, some discipline to our POCs, but honestly, I'm not even sure where to begin. What would you say to that individual, and where would you help him or her start, thinking about adding some rigor to this process?
Yeah, so that's a common one, especially with younger companies. One of the first things we like to get into is to try to get some metrics to see if they even have the metrics. Like, do you know your technical close rate, right? How many POCs do you do in a quarter as an individual or a team, and how many of those get a technical win decision at the end of the journey? All right, and then you got to peel apart the layers to find out, okay, what's the issue? Is it because I'm giving us bad POs, bad opportunities to work with, and that really aren't well qualified, and I can't really create decent success criteria? Or is it more, we got all of that, but when I get into a POC, I just can't seem to keep it on the rails, right? Keep it going at a good pace, keeping folks involved, things along that line. The current state of the SE environment, as I stated earlier, with the shortage, is just going to make this harder, right? Because I talk to more SE leaders that say it's tough because I got one or two hires and I got to keep this team moving, and I got to support more reps than the ratios allow for. So I think what we're talking about here is what true scale, right? How do we scale the team? How do we get the most out of the SCs? How can an SC, instead of working 4 or 5 POCs, maybe go to 7 or 8 or 9? I think it's structure. So when I walk into an organization, even with Provarity, I like to understand what their POC plan is. Like, what's the model? Do you have any documentation, structure? And it's an amazing percentage of the organizations do not even have common structure, which makes it 10 times harder to even onboard an SE, because we've been doing it for years. How do you, first 30 days, you got to learn the pitch and demo. And then by the 90-day mark, I want you to be able to manage and run a POC. So for 2 months, we're going to ride along. You're going to tag along another POC. I see and watch him do it. Well, you may see those calls, but you don't see all the behind the scenes, all the other things that have to go on in prep and planning and preparing. You just, you're seeing a handful of weekly calls. So you need to really have some structure and some around a project plan on, do I have my check-in calls? Every check-in call, what was the notes of the check-in call? And then, of course, sales wants all that to roll back into the CRM. How's that all going to happen, right? So how do you build this structure where you can manage all this stuff? Now, a lot of organizations, they've tried building what I like to call POC or evaluation objects in their CRM. Obviously, Salesforce being the big one. The challenge with that is it becomes administrative. So, the only way to get intelligence out of it as an SE leader is you need to log in there once a week and, change the stage and, the date it's going to end. And when that occurs, it's on a Friday. I want to rush in there. I put the bare minimum data in there. So when he runs his Salesforce report, boom. Okay. Look, Dave's okay. Everything looks like it's running normal. The problem is none of that's real, right? It's literally administrative. And there's the POC platform tools like Provarity, and we have others out there. We're trying to automate that, make that be more streamlined, right? So now we can build you a framework where you're doing the same steps and you're checking the same boxes, and we're checking when those boxes are done, and the state is automatically being sent over. And if anything health-wise or delayed, it's all automatically sent over. So you don't have to worry about it. One of the challenges we see in the SEA relationship is when things go sideways and the AE never got the data, right? But let's face it. How do our SE leaders like to communicate us? Hey, is anybody struggling today? Who wants to step up? Yeah, you know what? I'm really struggling. It's counterproductive, right? So how can we build a system that can naturally collect the data and give the signals over to leadership so they know when things aren't necessarily going the way they should be going?
Yeah. By the way, that was Pam Dunn who chimed in. So Pam, thanks for sharing. It's always good to hear from you. Dave, how much say should pre-sales teams and or pre-sales leaders have in what deals go to evaluation or technical evaluation and which ones do not?
Okay. How much say should they have, or how much do they have?
Let's take both.
It should be equal playing field, 50-50. But that's not how it works.
How does it typically work from your experience?
Again, it depends on the scenario, right? AEs tend to have a lot of pull on what deals they want to, and in some ways they'll bully them in. One of the things that qualification can help at, I'll give you a great example. Let's say you have a large mega retailer. They want to do a POC, but it's only 10% qualified, but it's a 6-figure deal. And you may have a small mom and pop shop that's 90% qualified, but it's only a 50K deal. Which one's going to win on the AE side of the house every time, right? It's all about the dollars, right? But I'd rather have 3 or 4 of the smaller ones. I'll still get there, but it's an easier path to success, right? Because I'm going to have shorter, compact formula to getting to that technical validation, which is going to be easier. I go to the large enterprises or DoD side of the house. These are some long, lengthy POC cycles you can get stuck into, and they have a ton of things that can cause delay that's just outside of your control.
Yeah. I recall in one of our previous conversations, you mentioning that you have a pretty good batting average where it comes to doing these technical evaluations. And part of the reason was that you wouldn't accept or take on projects or evaluations that you felt just weren't well suited. How did you establish yourself and the ability to stand your ground in those circumstances?
I think it's sitting down with your AEs and having those conversations, right? Because the saying I like is don't pick losers. You want to have a good technical close rate? Don't pick losers, right? So how do you do that, right? I think there's some trust. As you get in this industry and you get a bit of a reputation, your career tends to take you. AEs leave, and all of a sudden you get a phone call. Hey, Dave, I got a great deal over here. You should come over and take a look. So we all get in our networks, and we all have them of AEs and the VPs of sales and the VPs of SEs we like working and selling with. And those networks is what keeps us going and keeps us tied with those types of individuals. But there is a bit of, you've got to be able to comfortably and professionally stand your ground at times. And then you need to prove it, right? So if you stand your ground and prove it, they will trust you. If they say, hey, this isn't ready yet, we're not taking it on, right? Absolutely.
You got to earn your stripes,
Earn
as I like to say. What's the best way to communicate to our sales counterparts? Maybe we're in the middle of a POC, a POV, technical evaluation. We just sense that either the customer's losing momentum, they're losing focus, or maybe we're having some challenges, some problems. How do we best communicate this to our sales counterparts? Again, without ideally making ourselves look bad, without pointing any fingers, but with in the interest of letting them know, like, hey, I'm concerned about this deal this quarter, and think something needs to be done. Like, do you have some advice for people that find themselves in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to sit down and have check-in calls with the team during the POC cycle, without a doubt. And when I do QBRs, I like SEs to do a slide on every active POC, state what the customer thinks, how we're moving from a time perspective, success criteria, concerns, blockers, any let's call them sales inhibitors, right? Product gaps, what's causing these things to slow down. As far as working with the AE, again, once you earn your stripes, it's definitely easier. But early on, you may have to bring leadership involved and sit down and say, hey, let's just have a team meeting on this one. Started a POC, things are going great. My lead evaluator just disappeared. Like, I need you to get engaged. And you'll have some strong SEs that'll be like SE leads that will say, you know what, if we can't have a meeting with the customer and get this team re-engaged, let's shut it down. So threatening to shut down a POC is a pretty powerful event in most organizations, right? All of a sudden heads pop up. Wait, we're going to close this, because now that means it's coming out of commit or forecast or whatever. So it's coming out, and all of a sudden people are waking up. Sometimes you just need your sales rep, because you want to be the trusted advisor. You can't be the bad cop. You need to be the good cop, right? So you got to send them in to get this thing re-engaged, to find out what's going on. Otherwise, it's not worth continuing. They usually do not end well.
Yeah. And I'm going to submit that the worst thing we can do, and I sense you will agree with this wholeheartedly, the worst thing we can do is sit on it and say nothing and do nothing. Would you say that may very well be the biggest mistake that you see SEs make, is when they sense things are going wrong, that they wait, they extend the benefit of the doubt. They're reluctant to raise their hand and say something, and then it becomes too late. Is there a bigger mistake that people make than that?
100%. Because let me ask you this question. What damage if you have the slightest bit of concern, is it going to be a bad decision to get eyes on it earlier? I mean, what's the negative to that? There really isn't, right? Just making sure you get the AEs and leadership involved, and we do a check-in with the customer. Hey, are we on track? Because sometimes you got to have those conversations, right? Yeah. So do it earlier than later, right? Yeah. Because you got to remember, if you can only handle 5 POCs and you have one that's off the rails, death and dying, that means I can't get another one in the cycle to replace it, right? Opportunity cost, right? Get it out. Get it out and get the next one in the get the next one back on the tracks.
Yeah. And I think the reason we're reluctant to raise our hands, so to speak, is we are afraid. Sometimes we're afraid to admit that we can't hit every ball out of the park, right? Sometimes we're afraid to admit that something that I'm associated with or involved in might not close, successfully. But we have to accept that we're not always going to bat 1,000. And look, some things are in fact, out of our hands and beyond our control. And we need to make sure that everyone's aware of the status of things. So,
yeah. And we're cut different as SEs. I mean, our community's different than sales. We just are. We're a collaborative bunch. We help each other out.
Yeah.
As leads, I mean, gosh, it's, I want to make sure my team's okay, right? It's a little CYA, right? So I want the intelligence and the data so I can come in and help the team and make sure I'm getting you the resources you need. If there's a POC that needs to get flushed out of the system, let me help you drive that, right? Yeah. So just because it's not in our comfort zone, it's not the way we're made, right? Reps, I mean, we've seen the color wheels, right? They're usually red or D, the dominance, and we're not, right?
Yeah. Well, and I love the fact that you just mentioned comfort zone. News flash, all growth happens beyond the comfort zone.
Yeah.
Period. Right.
Yes.
So if we're going to grow professionally, we need to push ourselves out of the comfort zone. Folks, I'm talking to Dave McCulley. We're talking technical win. We're talking technical evaluations. Dave, if you can believe it, we've been at this for 50 minutes already. You've been unbelievably gracious with your time. Let's put a few, let's dot a few I's and cross a few final T's. But before we put a bow on this, we've talked a lot about the technical evaluation, what we can do to shine light on the dark side of the moon, as you like to call it. Anything else that maybe we haven't touched on that you were hoping we would touch on briefly, just in terms of how we as sales engineers, as pre-sales professionals, can find greater and more consistent success in this really arguably the most challenging part of our jobs?
I mean, I love this field. I love this job. I really do. But with that said, it is not for everyone. I talked to you before. Some people hate change. You're not an SE, right? I think I've said it, right? The only consistency is the inconsistency in this business, right? Right. So sometimes it's just not for everybody. So you need to be able to pick your head up sometimes and look around and get out of it, because we tend to be very down in our lanes, right? Pick our heads up and look around, both from our customers, from our account reps, to our sales teams, to technology, to the space we're in, because things are changing, right? And we need to be a little open about how we're going to change with it and how we're going to adapt to it. And that's the one thing I think that's kind of made my career work for me is, be open. You want to, you're going to have to make changes, right? And if you can't do it might not be the job for you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And, I actually wrote this that you said this probably 15 or 20 minutes ago. Pick your head up. I'm going to repeat that for, a time or two. I just love the mental image there, because we can get so focused on the mission in so many different contexts, whether it's a demo, the POC, et cetera. Sometimes you got to, I like to say push your own pause button, but sometimes you got to pick your head up, right? In a meeting, or just sort of notionally, and sort of look around and sniff around, right? And let's make sure we haven't lost sight of the forest for the trees, and we've got the full context. So Dave, talk a minute about Provarity. You guys are in the business of helping organizations scale pre-sales teams and add some of that rigor to the evaluation process, ideally help AEs and SEs communicate more effectively throughout the funnel. Talk just a minute or two about specifically some of the things that you guys are doing to help sales organizations.
Yeah. So our goal is to really help the sales engineer, the sales engineering team, and the sales teams work a little more cohesively, especially when it gets down to the evaluation. Help to make sure you get into the right ones. And when you get in them, there's structure. We're all kind of working on the same playbook. Not enough where it's going to be crazy, overwhelmingly administrative, but enough where we can get the signals when we see delay, when we see some of the unhealthy signals like success criteria failure, which is like a death of a POC, things along that line. And then we help collect all that data. That allows leadership to get eyes on things that may be off, so you can comfortably go in there and take care of your team to make sure that they got the resources, the training, whatever they need to get those things to technical validation or technical win, and then get that intelligence. I like to call it marrying evaluation intelligence and sales intelligence to get it over there to that CRM. So if there's an evaluation that's going off the rails, as we stated earlier, or encroaching on opportunity close, that those signals are there early, so the sales team can make the adjustments they need, so they're not having those very uncomfortable quarters where you've missed your number. It's not fun. So that's a lot of what Provarity is trying to do. If you have a great process today, onboarding is easy. If you don't, I got a lot of history and background. I'm more than happy to share mine with you as well. But it's really focusing on getting the sales team to work really well and really tight together. Hopefully, if we can get you some tools, you can get your head up and you can focus on the customer a little bit more versus so heads down on what you need to be doing from a tech and project management and process perspective.
I so love that. And I love this notion of evaluation intelligence, marrying evaluation intelligence with sales intelligence. And really in doing so, you're bringing AE and SE together and really pre-sales leadership and sales leadership. And we want to get away from this idea of pointing fingers and second guessing. Let's let the truth, let's let the data and the truth speak for itself, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
I think
if I can give one advice to sales leaders,
please.
don't go to your SE and ask them how a certain opportunity is going. It's just not healthy.
What should they do instead?
That's
what
my
should
selling
they do
part,
instead?
right? I think you got to bring the team together and do it together, right? Because you can't ask me, I like to use the term ratting out my rep when that's the guy I got to make money with. It's such a bad place to be in mentally. It's like, because you want to answer the question, but you don't want to answer the question because they're going to run right back and say, hey, Dave said this PLC is going terrible. Yeah. And it's like, and that breaks rule number one, which is I got to have a great relationship with my selling partner. So let's not do the things that damage those relationships.
Yeah. Amen. I love that. I think those are words to remember. And I think we're going to close there. Dave, thank you so much for spending some time. I had a feeling our time together would fly by very quickly. They can reach you obviously on LinkedIn. Of course, they can go to Provarity.com. Any final words before we sign off?
Chris, I really enjoyed it. Great time. Always a pleasure having a conversation with you. So thanks again.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being here, folks. For those of you who hung around till the end, thank you very much. If you hung around for the recording, thank you as well. If you care to follow these, go to #TechSalesAdvice, and you can catch these every time we go live. We will be back here next Monday. Dave, my friend, it's good to see you. Thanks for hanging around for so long. We will definitely have you back next year, folks. And Dave, hang around for just a minute. I'll give you your parting gift. Otherwise, folks, we're signing off. And I see a number of people chiming in. Thanks for hanging around, folks. Cheers. Bye.